mind to continuous improvement programs. Martin taught me 27 years ago, and this is showing both mine and Martin's age, back in the UK, when I was a young and sprightly shift manager at that time. And I spent a couple of days with Martin, as well as he helped us with some improvement work we were doing in a corrugated box factory at that time. And, you know, he's still supporting that business as of now. So, yeah, I'll hand over to you, Martin. And yeah, if you're able to screen share, that'd be great.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for asking me, Simon, and I'm very happy to be involved today. Let me just go to share, and I'll go to my desktop, and voila. So thank you. So I'm going to talk about efficiency, but I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of recognized programs, which I would call the what. What are you doing? What are you doing to improve your business, etc., organizational development? I'm going to take an angle on the how. So it's not so much what we do, is it? And you'll all be familiar with this, but it's how we do it. So I'll start off just by giving a brief introduction to myself. So as Simon said, I'm Martin. I ex-Procter & Gamble, so I worked in Procter & Gamble for a considerable amount of time. I started off in engineering. They sponsored me to do a degree in something that was completely different, because that's the Procter & Gamble way, and that's where I accidentally stumbled over organizational development. And with my 15 years at Procter's, I combined that organizational development thinking with making improvements within the organization. So in those early days, I was recognized as somebody that made a lot of improvements and change. And then I joined a team, a global team, actually. So there was America, Europe, Australia, Asia, 3 big teams, and we were responsible for the major change programs within the company. You either stay with Procter & Gamble for the rest of your life, or you go into consultancy. It's the simple way it works. And they wanted me to move when the kids were all the wrong ages. So I then went into consultancy, and then eventually set up a NewLeaf International. And that's where I met Simon. So we work for large organizations, but we've honed our offering to those organizations in what we call an integrated framework, which is a combination of a lot of things put into a system that we work with the client with. And what I will touch on today is some of the philosophy behind that framework itself. And on another occasion, I'll be very happy to come back and talk to you about the structure of that framework. So if that's okay, I'll crack on. Put any questions in the chat. I think Simon's probably mentioned that. I'll look at those as I go, if I can multitask, and if it's appropriate at the time, it might work that they get answered as we go, or there'll be time at the end to do that. So the next point is we're talking about inefficiencies, and before I start on anything, I always want to make sure that we have a grounding in what we think inefficiencies are, because if we work in manufacturing and we make widgets or fill jars with jam or whatever it might be, we have a visual representation of what our organization does. And we can see jars of jam not getting filled, we can see labels not being put on correctly. But in non-manufacturing organizations, it's less easy to see that inefficiency. But we all have it. We all have inefficiencies, as I'm sure you know, because I'm sure you're dealing with those things. So I just wanted to be clear that we're talking about anything that's going wrong in an organization. So as I said, if you're filling jars of jam, you can see broken glass on the floor, you can see something going wrong. But in industries that we work in, and we started in manufacturing, to be honest. That was my background in Procter & Gamble. As you see from some of the examples with our clients, we've taken all of that thinking into service industries, finance industries, and anybody that's got people in it. So that's pretty well anyway. So eliminating inefficiencies is the theme. And although there's a multitude of things to talk about, when Simon asked me to help with this seminar today, I thought of 4 key things. So there's more, but I want to talk about 4. And I'm looking at 4 things that we see quite often. So we go into those large organizations. I mean, I haven't gone into all the detail, but there's 16 consultants in NewLeaf, so we're spread across quite a number of organizations, and we see inefficiencies. The client, the organization that we're working with, see these things, and that's one of the points that I do want to make today as well, is we don't think we can go in and see things that the client can't, but it's that, again, it's that addressing the how are we going to do it. So we know about lots of programs, but how they work is different in every business. So 4 key things. The first one is, I think when we either embark on a significant change program or we review our current ones, we don't necessarily think differently. So one of the things that, because big organizations are successful, that's why they exist. So we've all got levels of success. And what I notice and what we see in businesses when we go into them is they tackle an initiative with the same thinking as they use in their day-to-day operation. So they don't think, all right, we're going to do a lean program, Six Sigma program. Now we've got to open our mind to looking at that much differently than if we were processing insurance claims, or we were, to go back to my somewhat simplistic example, we're filling jars with jam. So we've got to take a different thinking to that. And that is supported with something that we use quite a lot, which is something that Deming introduced to the organizational development world. And what he basically said, and I'll get my magic pen out, the way we think, and this is why we think it's important to consider thinking differently, drives the systems that we've got in our organizations. And what I mean by that, or what Deming means, isn't IT systems or just the processes that we use for checking something in the business. He talks about all the work systems, and this is where systems thinking comes into a lot of change opportunities. We have to think in systems, and this model is our foundation for trying to explain that. And those work systems, they come in 2 varieties: hard systems, ones that you can touch, feel, their processes. They're a check sheet for collecting data. They're a problem-solving process. The hard systems, you know, you could go into a business and say, put it in my hand, and somebody can show you that process. And the other work systems are the soft systems. And the soft systems are the sort of habit type things that happen in an organization. They're not written down, but we always do this at 8 o'clock. The 2 shifts come over and they always do that. It's not written down, but that's the way we work, you know. So there's hard systems and there's soft systems. And what Deming was clear about was the way we think drives what we've got in the business. So if you have a job like ours, and some of you have, you would go into a business and you would look at what was taking place. And you should be looking at, well, where's the system for that? What's the process for that? What's the methodology? What's the tool? So what Deming said was, the way we think drives those systems, and then that's where we see the behavior in the business. So when we go and watch something happening, that's driven by those work systems. It's not necessarily driven by those hard ones, But when we make change, and all of you have been through this, I'm sure, when you make change, we're more inclined to focus on those hard systems. Let's give the team this tool. Let's give them that. But also we've got to take, equally, we've got to take into account the soft habit type systems that are in the business as well. And that needs new thinking, because if we're technical, or business is technical, we see this a lot, say, for example, in the finance industry. If we're very cautious about looking after people's money, and I'm very grateful for that, we're often very cautious about how we put a meeting board up, or we're very cautious about introducing a way of collecting data. That thinking, that culture takes shape in the change program as well. And we should try and make sure that we're conscious of that and stop it. So Deming, going back to Deming, the systems we've got drives the behavior. So there's a team of people doing things, and it's the work systems that drive that, not the individuals. And then that gives us the results that we get. So little graph or whatever the result is, the results are driven by people doing things, and it's the system that drives it. And as I change color, because I can, the punchline to this is that the results we get aren't driven purely by maverick behaviors, they're driven by the system. In fact, Deming says 95% of everything associated with results is driven by the processes that we have in the business, the systems. And that leaves only 5% that is individual or team behavior. And what happens sometimes, now, I'm sure you're not into this situation, but sometimes without the structure of a joined up initiative, managers in a business can easily see the behavior and try and improve the results by asking people to do things differently. The results drive a different change in behavior, and we spend our time being driven in that circle of let's find ways of changing behavior. Let's change their behavior. The team aren't doing that correctly. The individuals aren't marking off that data sheet. And we end up living in a world putting a disproportionate amount of time into what is only going to make us insignificant change. So when we look at our programs, we've got to say to ourselves, they are driven by improving the systems. And we're only going to be as good as the systems that we design by the way that we currently think. So we've got to think differently. And this isn't magic sort of wishy-washy tree hugging stuff. It's just simply saying, we're taking our old thinking here. We've got to stop that. We've got to think differently about something. We've got to balance this hard and soft. Successful initiatives aren't only going to be driven by putting in tangible systems. We're going to have to change the work systems that drive people doing things differently. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. So the initial thing is I would just ask you to look back at in your organizations or where you're working as a consultant, think about reintroducing the thought about, are we carrying on in the way that we always think, or are we checking our thinking all the time? And is that checking associated with systems? So that's the first point. As I said, I'll take many questions as I can at the end. But the next point I wanted to make was that people don't see their own end-to-end process. So we ex-Procter & Gamble, there's no company bigger, so we've just naturally work in large organizations. That was the big door opener for me, and I've been grateful ever since. But when we go in and we talk to individuals, people employ good people. Right? People don't go, oh, let's have somebody average doing that. oh, I can't be bothered, let's just get some people doing that. People in general go and want to do a good thing. One of the soft systems is that they only live in a world which encompasses what they do on a day-to-day basis. So what we see is that people wanting to make a difference work within the confines of a relatively small boundary. And then we manage like that. And what happens is we can make improvements in parts of the organization, people are enthusiastic to do it. But when you look at the bigger holistic view of the organization, that improvement in that little area hasn't made much difference, unfortunately. And yet again, it's been, you know, a process of putting a lot of energy into a small area. That's got a name, you're probably aware of it. So one of the things that, three things I should say, about people not seeing the end-to-end is what I've already explained. Now, the technical term for that, and you know, I'm not a lecturer, but behind everything we do, there's quite a lot of theory. And the theory is, or the terminology associated with what I've just said, is called reductionism. Right? So you go into a big organization, you've got to see a big view, you've got to make some changes, but the danger is that we all go to a point, you know, so sales isn't doing very well, so there's a big focus on sales. Manufacturing's poor, make a focus on that. Distribution isn't getting stuff out on time, make a focus on that. And individually, you do a good job in one of those areas, but when you look at the connecting parts, when you look at the end-to-end, it hasn't made that significant difference. And one thing I'll explain with the next slide is we've got, and this links back to what I said about thinking. So we've got to think differently. We've got to think linear, and we've also got to think holistically. And we can all do it, but we have to take our brains to the gym. All right. So if we, sorry about the drawing, but that's meant to be a brain. All right. I'll try and put it in proportion. Don't think it should. If it looks like anybody on the call, that's not intentional. All right. But the point is that we've got. I'm making something a bit simplistic here, but there's the left brain and the right brain, and this is very logical. So if we work in a technical organization, if we've been developed in a technical discipline, engineering, accountancy, high science, those things, it drives that left side, that linear, logical, step-by-step approach. The right side, the more creative thinking in this, that drives the interconnecting, interdependency, holistic point. And that's not linear, that's more, the world's a little bit more like a ball of cotton wool. And if we join that together, we tackle understanding the process a little easier and also involving people. And then the third point is that when we look at efficiency, and this is linked back to reductionism, when we look at it in one isolated part, you know, where we're meant to make 80 widgets or fill 80 jars of jam, and we're meant to make 100, and we make 80, we find that that's quite good, right? You know, 20% inefficiency, that's not bad. But when you take that part of the business and join it up with the rest of the business, that doesn't really represent what our change colour. That doesn't really represent the whole inefficiency. And what we found is, unfortunately, when you take the end-to-end, that most organisations are around 30–40% efficient when you take the whole end-to-end process. So how people do it, and you must have done this a lot, is they draw flowcharts. So this slide is to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with flowchart in the organization, and I'm sure everybody's done it. So There's nothing wrong with that, and it must be done. So here with the situation where that part there could be at 80%, and reductionism says, right, we've got that sorted, but what do we do? How do we tackle the other parts? And we look at the gaps between things, and we say, you know, what can we address there? And we see it in that. Just go back to the brain, the logical way that we will see that. We will see things that are not happening between that step, and we'll address those things. There's nothing wrong with that, but we must do both. Now, the other diagrams, these are things which you might have been quite familiar with, you might use, so I might not be talking to the majority, but the other angle is rich pictures, or getting teams of people, here they are, teams of people, getting them, and this is a real example of finding a room, big whiteboard, and just saying, how does the business really work around here? Because I can plot it out. This is how it's meant to work. This is the logical, linear way. We do that, then 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 we make a decision, then we do that. But actually, when people take their own individual experiences and put them into a less structured approach, you suddenly get the logical side of the flow chart. So behind all this somewhere is a flow chart. But what they do is they put all the things that they see every day, all the interconnecting bits of communication, the things that go wrong there, all those things. It makes it more like a human body. And this is a tip that I use all the time with my own people, is you don't see an organization as a motor car with all the joined up bits, and if you take a piece out, it doesn't work. You know, that's that linear thinking. But if you see it as a human body where you've got all the major organs, but also you've got all the little nerves, the blood veins and all those things, they're the things in the business which work with communication, the transfer of data, all those things. So when you get a group of people together and they're looking at what's going on in their business, they're seeing it both as a hard and soft. So it goes back to that process as well. So seeing the true end-to-end, you see all these little bits of inefficiency. The third point is pitching the solutions at the wrong level in the organization. So if you take the end-to-end, which we've talked about, and you start a program, or you're reviewing the current programs that you're running, there's a certain way of going about looking at the simplicity of what you could do versus the complexity. And often it's more successful to start with the simple and move to the complex. However, because we're bright people, well educated, we then embark on a journey of improvement and naturally take our intelligence with us and go, right, let's make this quite complex. Now, there are exceptions. There are some pharmaceutical companies that we've worked with where their efficiency, their OEE is very, very high. Their product is complex and they're very efficient. So we have to pitch support that is associated with that, but it doesn't mean that that support is effective in another organization, because that should have been pitched with different thinking. So what do I mean by this? Well, I'm going to, again, just highlight 3 points here. So one thing is that you can start with a complex or multifaceted initiative too early when there's some simple things to do. So that's the one point, which I'll explain again with some drawings. And then another reason why things are pitched at the wrong level is that organizations use the initiative for the wrong reason. So we've been involved a lot of instances where we've turned up and somebody says, we want Six Sigma, we want lean, and of course they do actually, but it's the thinking that drives that actually they lose sight of, and we would call it the tail wagging the dog, is that the initiative becomes more important than the reason why they're doing it, and you lose sight of doing the right thing sometimes. And the other point, and I'll touch on this with a separate slide, is we don't engage people particularly well. I remember one example, she's not on the course, so I've got no fear of saying it. Very senior person in a bank that we're still working with them. So, but a very senior person told me, we will have everybody engaged by the 31st of March. And I thought she was joking. I was about to laugh because she misunderstood. What she was saying was, we're going to tell everybody by the 31st of March. Doesn't mean they're going to be engaged, of course. So when we pitch things, we've got to be considering how we engage those people. They won't naturally be engaged because they've been told that they're now going to do things differently. So 3 things there, and one I'm going to use is the infamous apple tree. All right, so the apple tree, every apple identifies issues in the organization. So as we said at the beginning of the slides, every organization has inefficiencies, so we have them. And what I've added to this apple tree, so obviously the concept is higher you go up the tree, the harder the apples are to reach. So if you relate it to issues in the organization, they're harder to get at the top. So that's the concept, of course. So I've drawn 2, I don't know, rulers, graphs, lines. One of them is efficiency. So one of the things to consider is this pitching at the right level. So whatever your efficiency is in the organization, so let's say that's 50%, let's say that's 80%, let's say that's 90%. The higher the efficiency, the more harder it is to reach those apples that are issues in the business. However, when you take the end-to-end, which is what I tried to illustrate earlier, and you're at 40% overall, 30% perhaps, and obviously people don't like to hear this, but you know, when you look at the bigger picture, that's often where people are. Then when they're looking at where they should be on their improvement journey, they should be tackling things that are at the lower ends of the apple tree, easier to reach things. Now, the other line, the other reference point is how much effort and complexity should we put into the program? So when you're at a fairly low level and you've got low hanging fruit to pick and make improvements with, then you need less complexity in your program. And this is well seen. You can see this well in. I'll just pick one great initiative. I mean, we use a lot of the tools all the time. There's nothing wrong with the initiative, Six Sigma. But I was saying to Simon the other day when we were talking about life in general, and if you relate the effort and complexity with, say, for example, Six Sigma, so you've got master black belts, the type of thing that they're trained for and what they do really addresses these top, hard to get, more complex things. Then you go down to black. So it's a good way of illustrating. Then you go to green. If I could write, it's 3 o'clock in the morning here, by the way. So any excuse for scribbles, you're going to have to live with. Then you've got yellow, general sort of stuff going on there. So if you take Six Sigma, then you've got an illustration of that complexity. And what happens in an organization, and I'll just change the color of the pen for a second. What happens in an organization is that people are, because we're clever and we put effort into things, we train here. So what we go and do is we tackle these things that are hard to reach. So we drive programs that are going to achieve those things. The trouble is there's a great danger of a disconnect, and the disconnect is with the operation people. So the operational people, however they are, so this is a line manager in an organization, okay? He's tackling a world that lives down here, and he's constantly not just having issues with low-hanging fruit, he's actually got things that every day are just wrong, are just falling on the ground, and him or her and their people are having to tackle these things. So on a day-to-day basis, they're tackling these inefficiencies, they're walking over problems in the business, not in every organization, but a lot. And yet we're building an initiative that gives us the skills to tackle these. So there's a disconnection often, or quite often, between what people are tackling as projects and what people are needing in a world that, when you're trying to do 100 invoice passing, 100 insurance claims, 100 financial transactions, or making 100 jars of jam an hour, and you're only making 40, your world's a different place to the one here where we're putting complex or sophisticated solutions in the business. Obviously there'll be a time when that's important, but that's got to be cleared up as well. So that's got to be cleared up. So any initiative has to balance clearing those things up with the high-reaching opportunities in the business. And again, the end-to-end overall effect is you can do a brilliant job on a couple of these pan-organizational issues, which often master black belts are involved in, make a fantastic difference there. But the overall effect of everything in the business is still shadowed by the day-to-day challenges that trying to engage the line managers in with the operational people is a challenge, but we get well-trained people up here. So it's a balance. It's not one or the other. That's the linear world, but it's both. So I find that we talk about the apple tree quite a bit, engaging with those sort of people. So another way of explaining this, not just with apples, is again, well known, you know, I come from the old days of TPM and quality management and all those initiatives. So I'm going to use the Iceberg as well to illustrate in another way a similar thing, but we've got to work on both. So we know now you won't have many icebergs in Australia. I'll be the first one, or New Zealand, but I'll be the first to say that. But the concept of an iceberg that I think we should know already is that only about 20% of it is above the water. So if we relate this to issues in the business, what we see are these. Now, I'm not relating this to apples, but it's a similar thing. So up there are the issues in the business that we see. The logical linear side of us says, I've got to tackle those. If I don't tackle those, and here's the ship. The ship's the organization. We're meant to make 100 jars of jam an hour. We're meant to process certain activities in the business. That's our challenges, that's our KPIs, that's our objectives. And the ship is our organization trying to move forward with our performance. And we see these things. So these are the problems that we see, and they're stopping us from achieving what we need to do. So we've got a blockage. So that blockage, obviously, we need to address. So you know, sorting that problem out is really important. Working really well to eliminate that one. Problem solving that one and eliminating it. Getting the team of operators together to work out why the tops aren't going on the jars of jam. Sorting this out here. All these are very good things. And it's tackling the things that we see. However, we've got to take the thinking to the level of the iceberg, which says, if we eliminate all these and we get really, really skilled at it, then we're always going to be addressing problems. And the reason why we're always going to be addressing problems is that under the surface, if you go back to where I was here, this ops team here are always seeing these little things, those low hanging fruits, but importantly, the things they're walking over. So these are defects. So up here, we've got well-seen problems, issues, maybe opportunities. So we see those things and we skill ourselves up to address those, but we need to be looking at these things down here. And of course, you all know that the importance of that is because always 20%, the physics, but it's equal in organizations. As we eliminate these things pop up. What was a problem down here, an invoice number always being wrong, and the person that dealt with it just knew what to do. One of those soft systems, you can't put it in my hand, it just gets fixed. It's one of those walking over, working round, low apples that have fallen on the ground. That thing gets fixed. It's a defect, but it gets fixed. Then that person changes job. Then that person retires, leaves, moves. It's not logged, it's not recognized, it's not visible in the business. And then what used to be something that we managed to work around then becomes one of these things. It becomes a reason why we can't work, why we can't be as efficient as we should be. So we've got to recognize there are problems, but there's also just defects, things that are wrong, but not stopping us today. And it's a real challenge, isn't it? It's a real challenge in the business to say, we've got to achieve our targets. We've got to achieve our objectives, our KPIs. These are the things that's stopping us. Let's put all the effort in there, but we could be circling around forever, being very good at addressing those, but we're always going to get new ones. So we've got potential new ones creeping up the organization that at the moment are only small things, a loose bracket on that packing line that fills jars of jam. It's not actually broken, but if we don't address it, it's going to be a breakdown. And that's the same in a non-manufacturing environment as well. So it's more about a mentality about, hang on a minute, let's put the small little things right as well. And of course, that operating person there that always self-corrects something, that's what's important to that person. So she's well engaged because if she can see that that's a real nuisance to her, she's made some significant difference in the business. If we're looking at the world up here and we're change agents, we're senior managers, we're business owners, if we're on that crew and we're only seeing the visible stuff, we're not engaging with the people that are living with all this all the time either. And that's why it's important to balance those two things. So that's another illustration of pitching things at the right level. So there's two levels there. Yes, we've got to be aware of that apple tree, and that apple tree lives up here somewhere, but we've got to be aware of the root causes of things that we can address just by, we don't have to have a particularly scientific, analytical approach to finding these things. If you go in a business, and you must do it yourself, when you go in a business and ask people what's wrong, they'll tell you all those things. You know, we do programs and people go, well, you know, when are you going to start? And we go, on the first day. Well, aren't you going to spend a long time understanding how we operate? Well, that's not good value to you. Good value to you is we go in there, ask people. Now, if you're operating at that level, it might be a different story, but not many people do. So how do you find out what all these things are? How do you find out what to start on? the people are dealing with this stuff every day. They know, we've got to give them credit for that. So the fourth point is engaging with the workforce. So that's why I've put this one in today. So engaging with the workforce is really important, and it links in with what I've just said there. We've got to give them credit for the fact that they spend 8, 10, sometimes 12, sometimes more hours a day in their area of the business. And apart from somebody that only started yesterday, they will probably have a really good idea of what's going on there. So engaging with the workforce is the fourth thing that I wanted to touch on. So again, I've put 3 things in there. Is that when we embark on a improvement program, then we're inclined to go, well, so what are we going to do? And this is where Procter & Gamble had a massive light bulb moment. And I was fortunate that I was as I said, I was in one of these teams. I was a European person in this global team of integrated work systems. So we realized when we reflected on things we'd done in the past, total quality, I'm old, we've already established that. So I go way back, TPM, total quality, lean programs. I've grown up with all these things. They haven't changed much, by the way. They get new fancy titles from occasions, but nothing, the philosophy behind things hasn't changed at all. So there's a danger that we go, right, what are the tools and techniques? And I think we've got this a lot from the automotive industry as well, because they're very good at making sure that all the components of a car are put together in a very effective way. But when you are in a different sort of organization, you might be able to take those tools and techniques, Lean, Kaizen, Kanban, all those things, but you've got to take the thinking and the people with you. So you've got to join the tools with the capability of the organization. So you've got to understand the capability of people to join those two up. You can't just give people tools and expect their capability to increase, especially when we're asking them to work on stuff that they're walking over every day. We're not asking them to work on that. We're asking them to work on more disconnected things to their day-to-day. Often we think that we need a lot of data, and this refers back to clients saying, well, aren't you going to need more? You need to spend a month with analytical people understanding stuff. Well, you can churn data to death, but ask. So the consultation thing is ask. Don't go in a room somewhere. I've seen this a lot, by the way, but I'm sure you're better than this. I've seen people go in a room for months looking at data, churning over spreadsheets, looking at the connecting parts of why one set of data doesn't match another. When actually they spend all the time doing that, then they go out of this dark room for a while looking at all this, and then expect everybody else in the business to have spent the same amount of time as them and go, it's clear we need to work on that. I've worked it out. I've spent ages at it. And they go, what? This is the thing, I've worked it out. Well, I'm walking over apples here. And you get that disconnection. But you'll never get everybody engaged, all right? So I'm not here in a sort of, oh, the world's wonderful, everybody loves each other, it's going to be great. It's not. So when you look at so this is a random group of people. So this could be a group of people in your organizations, the ones that you're working with, the ones that you're in. And as a rule of thumb, I would say that you need to look at any significant number of people. Even you can see what I'm going to say in groups of 6, project teams, senior management teams. There's an element of human nature that kicks in. And that human nature, I explain by dividing up any group of people into thirds. So there's 1/3 who are positive people. By nature, they're positive people. They organize things in their spare time. They run the social group at the local village. They do various things. They're naturally inquisitive. They want to know how they can help. They want to know the new ideas. They want to know where the business is going. They're just naturally positive. There's a third of people, and we've all got them, right? So there's a third of people that are in the middle. They don't, you know, they want to know what direction the business is going in. They want to know roughly what they're meant to be doing, but they're sort of questionable, and they don't know which direction they're going to go. So that's what I would call the middle third, obviously, because it's in the middle of the diagram. So we've got positives, we've got people in the middle, and then we've got people that we label, humans, we label them as negative, but I'm not sure they are. But that's about a third as well. So if you take any group of people, you've got a third that appear to be negative because they say that's not going to work. I've seen it before. We've tried this, it didn't work. It's no good asking me to do that. I've got a problem down here where I'm always changing invoice numbers. You don't understand. You don't understand it. It won't work, right? But actually, if we treat these people slightly differently and think, well, they just probably don't communicate very well, but their intentions are good, that represents an organization better than thinking we've got negative people in the organization. As managers and change agents, if we see these three thirds, it gives us a big opportunity to address our thinking a little differently and the way that we work with these people differently. Because I'll change color again, because we've got these dynamics, we should start a program. Because a third of the people are going to go, yeah, about time, I've told you. This is what we need to do. It's great. It's brilliant. And what we're doing with these people is these people will get drawn into the activities that we're asking them because they're questioning, which way do you want me to go? Which way? And then we get a migration of people, and we've got then something that represents a critical mass. These people are very important because we should listen to them. They might have, in a constructed way that appears to be negative, but they may have a serious concern here that is a real problem. And what should we do with that? We should make sure that these people that will run away with themselves, make sure that they're aware of some of these challenges that are being thrown out. One of the problems, and this is the sort of thing that, you know, I'm conscious of time, and the sort of one of the thoughts that I'll leave you with is there's a danger that when we embark or we're looking at our current programs, we think, why aren't they working? We've got to get these people. We've got to get these people on board. No, all we want is these people. We don't need to get those people. And what a disproportionate amount of time can be spent trying to convince these people that they should join. And then these people go, oh, that's the direction, right? That's how you get the managers to be listening to you. And then we get a critical mass, which is over on the wrong side of this third and a third and a third. So engaging with people is, at a simple level, is by nature, there's enough people in the organization that will engage. It's having the wherefore to go, let's just start. Let's involve people. Let's start at the right level. Let's go through the organization. Let's use the tools and techniques of all these great initiatives, but let's engage with people. Let's understand their capability before we give them some highfalutin process. Let's make sure that they're engaged in it. And the best way of doing it is to involve them. We do all sorts of, in our integrated framework, we find we do a lot of coaching with change agents as well. So it's part of the process, you know, and senior managers steering the organization because they're inclined to stand back. So if they've got a third party, and some of you on the call today might be in the same place as we are, you know, we go into a business where a third party, you know, we could get alienated, quite quickly. Oh, put them in a box. They're consultants. Oh, the dreaded consultants. All right. So we've really got to engage with people. And the way of doing it is we don't think we know the answers. We don't. These people know the answers. They've got more chance of knowing the answers than we have. And if you go back to the type of clients we have, we're able to work with lots of different faceted organizations, because we don't try and become experts in finance. What we do is we're experts in facilitating people. So it's the people that know what to do, how to do it. They don't get the breakthrough to enable themselves to be engaged. They get told. And that's one of the big challenges, I think, is we shouldn't be tellers, we should be engagers. So that takes me to, I see there's only a couple of things in the chat there, Simon, but I've tried to manage my time the best I can. I was up early this morning, so that leaves us to the questions part, but I'm very happy to do two things. One is answer any questions, and if I don't know, I'll tell you. And the second thing is to make some arrangements, Simon, that if somebody reflects on what's been said, they can come back to us via you or directly with me. I'm very open. I spend more time in the office, not at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I spend more time in the office than I do on the road. We've got a group of 16 people. Somewhere we will have an answer to something, and it might not always be me. So there's two ways. I'll look at the questions now. I don't know who's going to facilitate that, you, Simon, or whoever, but and also there's just an invite to anybody on the call to make contact with any questions in the future as well. So I'll leave it open, Simon, to you to facilitate any questions.
Great. Thank you, Martin, for your time. And again, particularly getting up early in the morning and sharing, years of experience with us as well. So, yeah, I'll just open the questions. We've not got too many people on the Zoom today. So I can't see anything in the chat. So, yeah, please open your mic and feel free to pose a question to Martin while he's here. I'll also run the poll as well at the same time. So you'll see that coming up on the screen shortly too.
If it's not questions, I'd be interested in anybody's feedback at all. They've done it, seen it, they've got better solutions. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just give you one question, Martin, just to kick off. Everyone always asks, how long do change programs last? And I know it can be how long's the piece of string as well, but in your years of experience, what have you seen? And
I've got a knee-jerk reaction to that, and people don't often like the answer, so I have to qualify it afterwards. But I'd say 3 years, and the reason why I say 3 years is you've got to pilot something, you've got to implement things, and then you've got to make it stick. So there's 3 phases: piloting, rolling out, and then sustainability. And if you take those 3 phases into the context of what you've really got to do, I wouldn't throw 100 people on a change program if you're in a business with 100,000 people. I would still roll it out. So there's a bit of a wishy-washy bit to the answer, Simon, and that is depends on the size of the organization. But an organization with 1 or 2 sites, I'm just making an example up here, across Australia or something like that, 18 months to implement, 18 months to make it stick. And of course, the make it stick bit is because you've implemented well, but we've got, this is for another day, if anybody's ever interested in listening to me, is that there's 10 sustainability processes that we should be conscious of after we've implemented. And then, of course, the answer is it never ends, because you've created, in that sustainability phase, you've created continuous improvement. So you've created people thinking differently, behaving differently because of different work systems, which I've touched on. So they never really stop. But the implementation part is pilot, not too much work, roll out, the biggest bit of work. But while you're rolling out, you're developing the skills within the organization to do it themselves. You're not getting somebody in doing it and then walking away and it collapsing. So that's why the sustainability thing is important. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Any more questions? I can see the poll. Nobody hated me. That's quite a good thing. Any other questions?
Martin, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. Yep.
Yeah, this is Ed from Tidros Todd in New Zealand.
Hello, Ed.
We are currently going through a scoping exercise to change our ERP computer system. We're doing that because the board didn't believe that they had the confidence that the vendors we'd chosen were applicable or were going to be successful. So we're going through the scoping. We'll go back to the board in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
My concern is that we're never going to have the answers until we start going through all the issues and all the problems and everything. And we can never 100% give a board or an executive that the answer that they want, that it's going to be the ultimate success.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your view is on trying to get them over the line, that we've done all we can at this stage, but as long as we've got the engagement, as you say, we've got the people on board, we've got the focus and the positivity, we can deliver success with a product.
Yeah. It's trying to encourage some of these seniors. We started off by the thinking. One of the things is we've got to think sometimes differently or enhance their thinking. And as we've learned, I've got more answers than one here, Ed. I'm sorry, but one thing is a technical solution. Upgrading software, it's very important. They're the tools and techniques, but the program, and you don't necessarily get this with technical thinking. It should engage the people as well. So there's one program, but it's got those two elements in it, and there's ways of doing that. And if you contact me offline, I'll show you some stuff, Ed. Otherwise, it'd be another hour's add-on to this. But engaging those two bits, but also senior management engagement is as important as the employees. And it's not just going into the boardroom and telling people stuff that they don't know. They're human beings. They're senior because sometimes they've done a fantastic thing. They're great. Other times they're there because they're humans and they found themselves there. So everybody has got insecurities, everybody's got various things. If you take those three groups, those thirds and the third, you'll find that in the boardroom. So the boardroom has to be managed as well, but it's not a prerequisite necessarily, Ed. That the important thing is to get together with what you need to do. If you're reviewing an existing process, initiative, carry on doing it, but you've got to engage the seniors in it. So we've learned this, that if we run programs that we're engaging employees, it's just as important as the senior people as well. So a slightly wishy-washy answer, but I could see when you were explaining, I could see exactly some of the issues that we have. And what we've done is we've a big bank, I can't name them, they don't like it happening, but it's one with a big black horse. So we working well with them because they saw exactly what you're saying, Ed. We drove or facilitated the capability bit because they were introducing high sophisticated technical solutions in the business and losing the people. No, I don't mean leaving, but losing them intellectually. So the systems weren't working. So we were brought in, we adapted their framework. And we went right across the business, developing the people in line with the implementation and the use of high-tech stuff. So it's doable, but it's not a 30-second answer. But it's common. It's not unusual.
That's great. Thank you, Martin. That's really good. Appreciate that.
Well, have a look at the email on here somewhere, and it says head office at NewLeaf. It's NewLeaf Inter. So, but Simon's got all my contacts. I can expand on that a little bit more on another occasion.